Hi friends, Heath Home here and welcome back to the channel. In this week's music production live stream, I'm going to be making some music with Ableton Live and discussing what do the following artists have in common. And those artists, sorry for the slightly clickbaity title, but those artists I listed were Kinda Music, Chris Stussy, Another, Trick, Rufus the Soul, Bicep, Maceoplex, we can keep going. So what do the following artists have in common? Stick around and let's dive into that subject. What is the secret sauce behind their success? Why do others try to copy them and why are they hard to copy? So I'll explain what I'm doing along the way. So whether you're completely new to music production and Ableton Live, or you're a seasoned pro, I'm sure there'll be some key takeaways for everyone in today's stream. In the end, the goal is to inspire you to boot up Ableton and go and make some music. Feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them. And so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. Xavi Diaz, good afternoon. Thank you. A shout out to you. Thank you always for your support. And thanks last week for being there right at the beginning where I had a little issue with my microphone, had a rogue reverb going on somewhere in the system. And thanks to Xavi Diaz, we kind of fixed that. However, my final live stream video, if you're looking for it, you'll find it under my normal videos, as I did have to trim off the beginning due to that little technical glitch. Sometimes that happens. That's what happens, especially when we're doing these things in real time, live and direct, no editing going on. So what is it about those producers that I spoke about and are in the thumbnail? What do they kind of have in common? And these are the artists over here. And these are just some of the ones that stand out to me. I'm sure you have favorites of your own, and I'm sure they probably have very similar traits about them, workflows, habits, concepts that they're doing, things they've discovered over the time. So today there's going to be a bit of chat at the beginning here, a bit of philosophy, a bit of coaching, the coach in me, the music production coach, trying to help you guys and girls out there. Maybe some of this is something you already know. If not, probably doesn't hurt to hear it again. Even if it is something you know, reinforces that. And if it's something completely new to you, then I hope it's super helpful. So what do all these artists have in common? Well, I believe something that's really important, as I've been doing this for a long time, coaching others, is finding your own distinct sound, finding your own unique sound out there in this world of music, and in my case electronic music. Perhaps you're working with a different type of music, but it's kind of finding your own unique distinct sound. I don't like to use the word original sound, as I think that's a pressure that is almost too much for us to handle sometimes, you know, trying to do something that's never been done before out there in the world of music. I don't think that's really the answer. It's more about finding where you fit in the world of music and your own unique sound. We hear it quite often, that concept as well, spoken in different ways. Some A&Rs that I know who run very successful record labels, they talk about a lot about what kind of music they want to receive from artists, and they want something that kind of fits into their label and sounds that the label releases, but they don't want you to sound already like an artist exactly that is on the label, as they already have that person and they're already releasing that person's music. They want you to maybe sound like them, but somehow a bit different. And so working on that theme, that's the kind of thing that all of these different artists possess. They possess their own unique and distinct sound. How do they get to that? You know, well, let's say we could start with time in the game. Funnily enough, something I like to do often when people talk about a particular artist, again in coaching sessions, maybe they bring up a particular artist and we go over to Beatport platform, if you're familiar with it, for buying lots of electronic music for very popular DJs. I use it myself. And you pop that producer's name in there and you can flip the releases from new to old or old to new. And if you flip it, most of the time you'll find that a lot of these artists, they have around 10 years. So they might be absolutely on fire right now, they're hot, they're doing everything right, but it's not happened overnight. It's happened over a period of something like 10 years, perhaps. Is that something that should put us off from doing music in the first place? Do we think, all right, okay, 10 years, I'm out. That's just too much for me. I'm not in the journey. Throw it in the bin and I'm quitting. Well, obviously, that's the next thing. They haven't quit. I'm sure during all of that time, there's been highs and lows, successes and failures, but they love making music and that's why they're in it and they're passionate about it. And they've kind of worked hard, put in the hours, put in the time. And over that time, they've kind of, found their own unique and distinct sound. But there is a pattern there. Time in the game definitely helps. Maybe with help from people like myself and many others out there, perhaps you get from A to B a little bit quicker by having a coach or having a trainer or a teacher or somebody helping you with your music. But in the end, time in the game is a critical factor, hours doing it. So that's the next thing I wrote here. Hours spent learning their craft. They've put in time. Again, it didn't happen overnight. What else have they discovered as they've been doing that? They found their strengths. They found what they're good at, perhaps what they really enjoy and they have the most fun doing, and they kind of know their strengths. Maybe it's discovering what genre you want to make. Maybe it's discovering that you're really good at writing melodies. Maybe it's discovering that you're excellent at programming drums. So they found their strengths and they often stick to those strengths and really hammer those strengths. That's something that's kind of important there. They didn't quit. As I said, they've learned from their successes and failures, the ups and downs. They haven't walked away. They love it so much. They've been persistent. They've kept themselves in the game. They stand out from the crowd, whether it's lots of creativity. I'd definitely say most of those producers, looking back here again at this list, these ones that I've listed, they're innovators. They're doing something, again, perhaps a bit different to everybody else. Again, comes back to that unique, distinct sound. They have that, again, written here. Do they do something better than everyone else? Are they in a genre or a particular type of music where there are many great producers and they're just better at that particular sound? That could be true, but I think everything I've sort of spoken about up to that point all ties into that. So what might they be, sort of what might some of their strengths be? What might they be better at doing than everybody else? Perhaps they're great at the composition part, the songwriting, the creativity, the innovation at the beginning. Perhaps they're great sound designers. They come up with sounds that are unusual, strange, nobody else has them. Perhaps they're great at writing grooves or coming up with hooks for their track, those kind of simple, memorable hooks that go into your head. If you can do that, you can have obviously a big success in music. If you can leave people with a memorable moment in every track you write, or the tracks, majority of the tracks you write. Perhaps they're very good at arranging and structuring their songs. So all of those elements could mean the difference between them and somebody else. And maybe in the case of some of these artists over here, they're actually combining those elements. So it's a combination of those things that make them kind of stand out. So looking across at my little session view window here, now we get down to, I guess, what I have to say about that. I think, what I would encourage, the bit that I want to leave you with today is to, in the end, how we're going to sort of achieve a lot of these things over here is by kind of setting up workflows, practices, concepts where we don't play it safe. We have some sort of element, some sort of audio effects, some sort of instruments or a workflow, something that we are using to not play it safe with, that we're hoping to come up with surprises from that workflow, or use a favorite effect that when we play around with that effect, we get results that are really interesting and different and surprising, and getting out of our comfort zone. There's many memes and comments and things out there that if we do things the same way every time, we get the same results. So if you always program your drums the same way, you always start with a chord progression, sometimes you want to flip that on its head. It might be nice to always have a certain structure, about your music, and maybe you really like traditional elements like beginning with a chord progression, and maybe you always liked starting with the drums. So that's fine, but somewhere in your system of practice, sound design, composition, arrangement, all of the things we looked at just a moment ago over here, you should be striving for some sort of like trying out different things in those areas, trying out things you haven't done before, setting up workflows where things are going to happen that you don't normally do, whether they're unpredictable or surprising. And in there is probably the nuggets, the gold, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's where you're going to find things that might well separate you from everyone else. So, you know, we're in Ableton Live. We're going to look today at, I'm going to grab a instrument from over here and play around with it and see what we can come up with in a creative way. Maybe it doesn't work, maybe it's not a success, but I'm going to use it as the element of today that is going to be the part that I'm not playing it safe with, that I'm hoping that it comes up with some cool results and I'll learn from it. And it could be a tool then that I go to more and more in the future. Again, if you know an effect inside out and it's capable of changing completely your bass line or your pads or your melodies, work on it and you bring that into your workflow every time and know that that's going to bring that little surprising element to your song. It still sticks in my head as the last little bit of this philosophy part. That's listening to Sting talking in an interview and him sort of talking about, you know, he needs surprises in 8 bars of music. If he doesn't hear something he hasn't heard before, he's checking out. And that's the same for a lot of other people, right? So hopefully that's a bit helpful. I think the thing is, like, you know, if you see going out, you watch a video of someone on YouTube here, one of your favorite producers, and they're using a certain plugin, and you go out and buy that plugin, and that's the answer to your surprising element in your track, all the presets in that plugin. That might work for a little while, but what happens when you've used all those presets? You don't have anything else to sort of pick up on. Do you buy another plugin? Could be a concept, but I think, you know, if you practice and learn the effects and instruments and discover, place into your production areas where you do something different to what you normally do, get out of your comfort zone, make surprises, then you're going to start getting your pathway towards this unique, distinct sound. And last but not least, you can do that in separate sessions, separate sound design sessions where you are not necessarily inside of the track. You do it on a separate day, just trying to come up with learning, what can I do with this devices, and how could that bring something new into my workflow that is not a safe traditional thing that I always do. So I hope that makes sense. If you've got any questions about it, fire them in the chat there. Now let's look at Ableton Live. Most of all the stuff in the window here is all notes for me. Chavi Diaz, if you're still there, I am going to do, or somebody else, a little just audio test here, just to make sure we've got, I'm gathering my microphone is probably fine, as someone may have already told me if that wasn't working, hopefully. So let's have a bit of music. Just have a little bit of limiter on the master just to boost it very slightly. So when we've got our volumes a bit lower later, that should be helpful. Let's almost move into this track as well. Well, hopefully, as I said, that's all working fine. Do let me know if there's any issues as we go along. We'll have a little bit of limiter there just to give ourselves a little bit of extra juice on the master track. We might turn that down later. If you are here joining the live stream, by the way, do introduce yourself, say hello in the chat, say hello to the other people in the chat, ask questions. As I said, this is a relaxed kind of Sunday live stream from Ibiza, trying to, you know, share things about music production and Ableton Live and hopefully inspire you and help you out on your journey. Chavi Diaz, thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate that. Great to know. So what device am I going to use today as my little bit of a not playing it safe surprise package type of thing? Well, I am in Ableton Live 12, so I am going to take advantage of an instrument that lives inside of Ableton Live 12, but the good news is that it does live outside of Ableton Live 12. It was around since probably 10, 11, even before that as a Max for Live device. And the only difference really is that now it's called Granulator 3 and it previously is Granulator 2. So it's had a reface, it's had some nice features added to it, but the concept of granular synthesis and a granulator, as I said, does exist in more earlier versions, and so you're not left out on the doorstep in the cold with no jackets. If you do have a previous version, grab yourself Granulator 2 and get stuck in. So I've got Granulator 3 here. It looks like this. I've dragged and dropped it on a MIDI track. It is an instrument. And I'm thinking, like, what I'm going to do today is, I think this is the thing about acknowledging things that are fairly straightforward to do and things that are not fairly straightforward to do. So I would argue, if you watch me now with a drum rack and making some drums and playing around with that, yes, I could spend a lot of time coming up with a really great groove, and that might be something we look at in the future, making great grooves. But for the moment, I'm just going to grab a simple drum loop that I've previously bookmarked and just use that instead of a metronome, kind of, just as a groove in the back. So I kind of have 3 here bookmarked. And they're deliberately kind of quite minimal. They're just literally a kick, a clap, and maybe a bit of a hi-hat. So let's set a BPM for today. I don't know, I feel like sort of somewhere around 126 could be interesting. So let's do that. Let's drag that in. So we've got a drum loop. Let's make sure it's not clipping. Remembering we've got a limiter just to make sure. The only reason I do that, by the way, I would never do that outside of working over YouTube, is just to make sure that, as I said, for you guys at your end, the music levels are not super low. So that's just a drum loop for now, just to give us some context in the background. Okay, Granulator 3. We've got this option to drop a sample in here and start using it that way. I've also got a couple of devices after it. I'm going to switch all of those off. They're not important for now. They're just kind of reminders for me. Sometimes when I get in this rabbit hole of a stream, I kind of forget things that I wanted to do and workflows. So they're just there to poke me in the ribs and tell me, hey, give that a try. So what I want to try and do is, like, I'm mic'd up here. So I've got my microphone plugged in. So something that's great about Granulator 3, Granulator 2, you need to separate your audio input from the granulator. So you need like a separate track that brings audio potentially into the granulator. So we can record different sources in the granulator. Granulator 2 has a device and a bit of a different workflow that you need to connect. In Granulator 3, this is one of the things they did that is great about it. We can kind of work directly into it here in this in-out section. So if I click that, I open up down the bottom here this lovely section that says capture, save, cancel, no input, length, and a few other drop downs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up to live and settings, and I'm going to bring on the input device my microphone in to Ableton Live. So in theory, I did test this before, so hopefully we won't get any funny business happening in the live stream, because there's one factor that I didn't test, which is for sure being live on YouTube. But let's take this audio track 4 here, and we can kind of see we're getting a signal into it, and it is me yapping away here on the microphone. So let's turn it to be monitoring off down the bottom, and then to in, so we can see we're getting a signal coming in here. And let's basically, we now know that that is. If we wanted to record my microphone, then I could arm the track here and now start recording my voice. But what we want to do is go back over to the granulator now, and let's bring it. Maybe what we'll do actually is just bring all this stuff here over to the very far left. And we can minimize all this stuff now as it's done its purpose, just there to get me through my philosophy speech. Hope you guys found that interesting, by the way. It wasn't too boring and you found it useful. All right, so we can get rid of that. Or we don't want to get rid of that audio track. That's the one we've just brought the microphone in on. Can maybe get rid of this one, and we can put the drum loop in the very beginning here. And let's call it drums, just so we know what's going on in there. And as I said, it's a bit of, I'm going to make my own drums later, but it's there as a guidepost, let's say. Right, back to the granulator. So down here, we want to search for an input, and we've got my microphone on channel 3. So if we pop in here and say, let's bring in channel 3, still don't notice any signal here yet. What I'm going to do here is go to the next tab, Post Mixer, and I'm just going to say Pre-FX, and we can now see, great, we've got an input coming into the granulator. Now, right next door to it is something that's kind of important, because the interesting thing about the granulator is when we start capturing in here, it kind of captures after you've spoken. So if I say after you've spoken and then hit capture, what will be in there is after you've spoken. So it takes a little bit of getting used to. You can move the length in seconds around a bit. That can help with latency and timing to get inside the capture what you were after. But I'm happy with 2 seconds. I'm also okay with the levels. I can obviously put the microphone further away if it's a bit too close, or if I'm clipping here on the meters. So do make sure, if you're doing something like me, that you're not going to be, clipping your meters, that it's going to be a nice level coming in. And so let's do a little bit of an experiment here. Drifting through space. Okay. So that has captured that little piece of audio, and as you can see, that audio track that I set up, we don't need it anymore unless we want to do several captures. If we don't like what we've got down here, we can come back to it in a moment. So for now, I'm just going to turn that off, so there's no input coming in here. And if I want to be super safe, I'll just pop over to Ableton settings, and I'll also take the microphone back out of it being an input source. And so now on our granulator track, we can start going through this vocal in different ways. So if I go to my MIDI keyboard in front of me here, and let's play a C. Let's first arm the granulator track so we know we're on it. So by default, we start getting that kind of, granulated playback, and I'm playing up and down the keyboard, and as you can probably hear, like most audio in this case, unwarped audio in a traditional pitch audio relationship, frequency pitch, tempo relationship, that when I go up high, it gets faster, and when I go down low, it gets slower. So another example, if we don't want to play it back on our MIDI controller, is we could bring in an empty MIDI clip, and let's just make sure we're getting a C3, which we are here. Why C3? Because that's kind of negating, it's going to play back the sample at an original pitch at this point in time. Think of the granulator like a sampler. If we're going to drag samples into it, we need to be kind of aware of what the pitches are of those samples. In this case, it's my voice, so it's a bit different to dragging a sample. We'll do an example of that soon, but still at the same time, it's probably a good idea at the moment not to get too carried away with the MIDI notes in different pitches. Just kind of keep them in the middle of the piano. We can also put a tuner after the granulator if we like, the same as you can with a sampler. And then, when we focus in on an area, maybe we can start to see that we're getting a particular pitch, right? Back up to my empty MIDI clip. Let's pop in a note. Let's make it legato. So now I could take my hands off the keyboard, right, and just let it drift along on that C3 note. And now we can start to adjust the granulator a bit. Position's going to move around where we're playing. You can also, by the way, drag up here in the actual view to position around if you wish. I like this bit on space where I said space. Sounds kind of cool. So we've got a bit of a position already happening. Scanning is going to move the behavior between the grain sizes. And just by the way, when you move around in the granulator, so as you can see up here, you can drag around the position, just pay attention to that little notch just above where you are, that little notch right there, because that's kind of telling you that all of this middle section here is what you are going to be affecting. So right now I'm affecting position. If I was to add any of these things such as key tracking, velocity, pitch bend, slide, pressure from MPE, envelope 2 that exists. So if you look, there are 2 envelopes here, an LFO and a filter. We can click over here on the left to bring that view up or back to the sample. So, you know, the depth of this device is very, very powerful. And it's the reason why I'm kind of having it today here as my not playing it safe, hoping to come up with something kind of cool. I've just thrown my voice in there. Why not? Let's see what we get out of that. Is it going to be something really interesting and cool? We're not in a sample pack. We're not using something more predictable that everyone else has. It's only on my computer at this point in time. All right, so just keep an eye on this notch. So if we move our way along, let's maybe jump to the grain size next. That's what the granulator synth is all about, right? So position is selecting a bit of the material, and as you can see, we could move that around. Grain size is about the size of the grains that it's breaking it up into. So you can go all the way down to like oscillator size waveforms. So you can see here we're holding a nice E note here if you wanted to then, you know, replay that up and down your keyboard. So if I stop my MIDI clip and I now play an E, nice, we can get a really nice melody out of that, very small, or riff out of that. Hey, Prof Bloom, I always enjoy your live sessions. Thanks, mate. Very welcome, and thank you for saying hello. Great that we have you here. Xavi Diaz and Professor Bloom, welcome to the Sunday live stream. If you've got any questions, fire them away. Great to have you on board. So yeah, that little small bit of my voice is really cool for that. So maybe we go hard at that, making a riff. So we could duplicate our granulator track. Let's do that. Maybe we save that idea for a riff for later, right? We'll put this audio track in between. We'll keep that idea for later. Quite like it. So let's go back to this, just playing that C3 MIDI note, and let's move the grain size a bit bigger. Right, that sounds really groovy there, right? So you can also, like, if you didn't have a drum loop here, so all I've done so far is just move the position to something I like, and now I'm messing with the grain size. And again, remembering the notch above here, amazing that almost all of these things, again, this middle bar here, I can have an LFO moving this grain size around. I can have an envelope playing with it. If you tell me you can't make something pretty wild with this, I'm sorry, but you can. So there's sort of, you know, in these fun sessions where we're trying to come up with surprises, this device is great. Okay, so let's move along to scan and see what that does when we hit the scan and play around a bit with that. Drifting through space, 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 drifting through space. That's nice. Drifting through space, drifting through space, drifting through space. So as you can see, that kind of spreads out the playthrough, it kind of, again, that with the grain size, you can get kind of all interesting, and the shape we'll look at in a moment, you can get kind of all these interesting little kind of rhythmical kind of granular changes, which I think is super fun. Also, by the way, there is a great question mark over here on the right. If you're wanting to know more about the Granulator 3 in Ableton Live 12, just click that. It takes you to a web page. It opens it up. Unfortunately, the way I use OBS, we can't see that because I'm just focusing in on the live application. But in your home setup, just click there and you'll get a breakdown on what all of these things do, and you can deep dive within the device itself. Drifting through space. So let's now play with the shape parameter. Drifting through space. 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 So over here we're getting a real kind of like, I hear Daft Punk sometimes in here when we get this kind of robot-y. Remember 35, the scan, let's try it. It's really pretty cool. I'm hearing lots of good stuff in there. It's really a choice of what you want out of it, but this has been fun so far. Through my voice in there, playing around just with this very first panel. Variation in the middle here, well, pretty much does what it says on the tin. It's like a randomization variation of what's going on over here. So it kind of randomizes those values. So like I said, you can get very deep with this device. We're just sort of touching the surface, right? And then over to the right, well, we've got repitching abilities here. So we could repitch the sample in the device itself. Same thing, the notch workflow is carried over here, so anything in the middle bar is attached to modulating the transpose. Spread repitches things a bit as well, left and right differences. They sound really nice. And then we've literally got our LFO controls here. So LFO frequency, LFO amount, and then the filter that's built in. So that's all pretty straightforward. And again, if we click this panel down here, there's our LFO. If we want to deep dive into what's the LFO shape and is it note synced or running frequency, what's the filter type, and there's our spare envelope that's not assigned to anything. So we could have a filter envelope, we could have a pitch envelope with it, we can assign it to what we want. And here's our main amp envelope, our typical ADSR amp envelope. So if we want something plucky, we want the release a bit longer. Attack a bit slower, all those usual characters in there, so we can play around with that as well. So what about if we take this C3 note, very, very basic stuff there for the moment. What about if we duplicate that down and we give it a new color, and in there we do something a bit different. So let's say we keep it to one note, so we've just got one bar of C3, but let's say we maybe kind of turn it into something like 16th notes across that bar. So we'll listen to that. And then maybe down the bottom here, we can open up chance and the velocity, and let's say in the velocity lane, we randomize that. And then let's go to the chance lane, chance of probability of the notes happening. And now we get to something quite interesting there, new pattern. And maybe what we could do, join a few of these and split some of these. So we get some sort of interesting kind of rhythmic pattern, right? Instead of just the, mind you, that's quite interesting as well. And then we did have the option of back to the MIDI controller. Something like that. So we could also use capture. And maybe just have a simple riff from in here. I don't know which one I played that I liked in the end, to be honest. I think this last one. This one here, like a bit later. Or earlier, might be actually. Something like that, and then we could kind of crop this. So let's just make sure it's highlighted up here. And then we could also hop into transform, just give it a little bit of quantization. Right, something different. So that was with the MIDI controller. Obviously we've got our other options up here. And it was done quite roughly. My MIDI controller could make it a little bit more refined than that. Quite like this sustained note though, what I've got going on there for the moment. So let's work with that one for a second, which is just the C note on the piano like so, and the rest that's going on is all to do with what's happening inside the granulator itself. Let's grab a MIDI effect, the velocity device, pop it in front of the granulator just so we can randomize the velocity of this C3 note a little bit. So it's not doing the same thing each time it plays through. It's a little bit different. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is now I'm going to use I've got my voice, I've got this interesting little piece of it. The granulator's doing its things. We've played around with a few different clips that we could use. We've also got this idea over here where I looped up the granulator really small. Same, it's still my voice. It's just looped up in a tiny section, and we've got kind of nothing in the clip, or we do have in the clip. Let's see. Okay. Let's see what happened there. So maybe let's just check. Are we able to copy that over with the sample in it? That might be, yeah, interesting. So what I want to do is save that sample, which you can do. Just if you look down now over here, you can see there's a save button. So we'll do that in a little bit, and then I can actually bring that audio and drop it in as a sample into the other track. but also I'm not sure if I've got the same parameters that, yeah, I've still got those set up, so it could still work. We'll find out in a little bit. Okay, so working with this, idea I've got in my head is to start making like little track parts for a musical idea. So one thing I'm going to do is grab a hybrid reverb, and I'm going to try and turn this first bit of the granulator not so much into a riff or a pattern, but into something like an atmosphere for the track, a nice kind of textured kind of atmosphere. So let's have the hybrid reverb on. And let's start playing with the hybrid reverb a little bit. So let's go into turning it into all algorithmic reverb. So the blend knob right over to the right. Let's make it shimmer. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to freeze this reverb as it goes. So I'm using the shimmer algorithm, all the blend is onto the algorithmic reverb. It's in shimmer, so we're getting this nice bit of pitch, 12 semitones kind of ghost layer to the original sounds, right? If I go up here, I can now start freezing the reverb. And now every time I click the arrow in front of the frozen button, I'm going to be allowing some fresh input to join what's frozen. So that's what we've got. If we don't like that, we can turn that off, start again. And now what we could do is come over to the track and stop it. And that's what we've got held in this reverb. So now what we can do is open up a new audio track, and we can get it to listen to the granulator too. We'll turn the monitoring off, we'll set it to in, and we'll set it to record. And we're going to record some of this atmosphere coming in, right? So this is the granulator plus the frozen reverb. Let it run for a little bit. Okay, now I might do another recording, because if I just pop back over to the granulator itself, and we'll defreeze the reverb. I didn't make a lot of modulation inside of here in the granulator, so maybe we could add our atmospheric loop. Is going to be a bit more interesting if this is a little bit more interesting in terms of its modulation. So what we might do now is actually use some of the envelopes and LFOs and just get a little bit of movement in here. So let's say maybe we start with the filter frequency, and we make that filter open and close a bit with an envelope perhaps, although there's not much happening because there's only this one long legato note. If we used one of these patterns, we'd get a bit more difference actually. So for example, if we use this one, and if we also, we'll try that in a moment, but let's say we use this, we've got a lot of note retriggering then, so the envelope would make a difference to the filter frequency, more difference. So let's set it at about 50%. And let's look at the envelope that we've got. Maybe bring the attack a bit tighter. So now each time that note triggers the filter, the envelope is opening and closing the filter. And the filter is a low pass 12. Let's give it a bit of resonance. So now we've got more character, we've got a bit more movement, a bit more vibe going on from this. Could also try a bandpass here, could be interesting. There are some fun filter types here. So we've got low passes, low pass and high pass. Right, so more or less a bandpass. I accidentally left my reverb on, but it was starting to give me kind of what I'm looking for results-wise. All right, so what could we have the LFO applied to? So we're using a bit of envelope 2. So open and close our filter frequency. Let's push it a little bit. A little bit less. Let's try out some of these other filter types. So again, remembering the name of today was to sort of not play it safe. We're trying to come up with surprises, getting out the comfort zone, looking at what separates all of these great artists. You know, a lot of things, but they are definitely, they've found their own distinct, unique sound. And just in Ableton Live, we're not using any fancy plugins here. We're using built-in Ableton Live 12 devices and effects here to try and come up with our surprising sounds. So, other filter types. Low pass plus a notch. Straight up notch. Notch and notch. High pass and notch, and then high pass. I think maybe back where we were. It's cool. So let's add a little bit of variation in here to these guys. Maybe a tiny bit. And then let's try an LFO a little bit on something. Let's maybe try it on the scan perhaps. Let me take the variation off for a moment just so I can hear. So things can get pretty wild again in here. Last but not least, the shape. That's kind of cool. So it's giving us a bit of a sine wave that's in frequency. It's moving a little bit the shape. Remembering the notch above here is telling me what I've applied the LFO to. If I push it hard, things can get pretty wild there. So let's just have a little bit of that. Okay, back to the processing at the end here, and also the clip. So we've got a few different clips up here. Let's actually give them some numbers here from the sort of little bit of experiments I've been trying as we've gone along. So one being just C being held, right, along one bar of C. 2 is a little riff I played with the keyboard. Maybe we should bring that down to C, actually. Nice, so we match up that. And then 3 is another one that I've done using chance, velocity, and a bit of a 16th note pattern with some variations in here. So that's, again, something quite interesting. Let's just grab ourselves a few more audio effects. So let's maybe have a bit of chorus here. Give ourselves a bit of stereo width. I think for now, the hybrid reverb was definitely the next element I want to use. Could also have a bit of corpus here, perhaps. Thinking that my idea here is to make a bit of a textured layer. So there's no doubt we can expand on the sound that we're getting from the granulator by adding processing after it. So we could even have a higher pitch here. The corpus could be interesting. It's always one of these ones that can give us a lot of bang for the buck. But I'm just going to go with a little bit of chorus, a bit of corpus, a bit of hybrid reverb, back to my idea there. And one last thing before I do that, I also want to copy my clip down here, number 3, and let's just try something else out. By the way, if you're here in the stream, welcome. This is a Sunday live stream here. We're looking at ways that we can find our unique distinct sound. We're using built-in Ableton Live devices. We're in Ableton Live 12. And yeah, I hope you're finding the video interesting. Do drop us a comment. If you're here in the stream, say hello to each other. Let us know how you're doing, where you're listening from, if you're finding it interesting, if you've got a question. Right, so on this one, I'm going to use some more of Ableton's tools. So we have used a couple of them already, but let's maybe try and arpeggiate this as well, because we don't really have a huge amount of musical pitch going on at the moment. We've got a little bit, but we're not really locked to a key or scale. We can kind of ignore this up the top here, as we're not kind of playing a certain scale at the moment, and everything we've put in the MIDI clips at the moment, all the notes are on C3, so we're sort of allowing the original pitch to happen of whatever this loop is, wherever this is set up, that's the pitch, unless we start, transposing it somewhere. Because now we're repitching the sample, right? So two semitones would be looking close, or one semitone plus a little bit of sense up here. There we go, almost into the green. So now we're getting a C for a C. We've repitched the bit of audio we've got in the granulator's been repitched to give us a C back, right? Okay, but I still wanted to try something over here, and that was to get all of these notes here, pop down to generate, and I'm going to try, transform is what I want, and I'm going to try and arpeggiate these notes. So let's select them all, let's have a look what's going to happen. Let's turn transform off for a second, and let's say we want 16th notes, and the style is going to be pretty important. Let's go for random, so we get random pitches out of it here, and we can play around with the rest in real time. So if we hit transform now let's bring the distance down so they're a bit close together. That's kind of interesting. Let's try adding some intervals to this. All right, we might come back to that. Not sold on that, but again, trying things out here. Let's go back to 3. Clip 3. Let's get our reverb working the way we want it. So I've got to be using my freeze function again that I was playing around with before. Before I do that, just unfreeze it, just make sure shimmers exactly how I want it to be. Yes. Let's try that again. Just before I do that, I do feel like before I had this playing through a lot more of the sample, right? So let's just see if we can get that. A little shape. Okay, so we've got a nice bit of frozen action in the reverb. Let's stop the granulator and the clip. Let's capture back over on our track that's already set up, this atmosphere. It's now got more movement than we had previously. Okay, let's loop up a bit of that. And we can either leave this track set up for more recording experiments, or we can just turn it into an audio track. Sometimes I like to leave it. Let me just unfreeze that reverb. Sometimes I like to leave it alone, and you can even label it as rec in, and then you can just basically use it to route other things into that track and record. So maybe we put that over here. And then we set up just a new audio track, and we can drag our favorite one of those into there, right? And I'll just bring back the ins and outs as I accidentally clicked over there. Okay, so now we've got this. Let's turn the volume up a bit. And now let's play around with this noise kind of layer that we've created out of the granulator plus the frozen reverb. Let's say we stretch it a lot, so double time it. Now let's play around with the reverse perhaps. Pitch, we can re-pitch it. We could try beats and change the preservation of the transients. Complex Pro. We could go to texture. All sorts of wild stuff possible in there. Let's maybe slow it down a little bit. Okay. Now let's add some effects to that and see what we can come up with as far as a layer goes to go with our drums, and we can put our Okay, so I want to try a spectral resonator on this. Okay, the next thing I want to do, I'm going to try setting up another audio track alongside this atmosphere. And on that audio track, I'm going to grab an envelope follower, kind of put some of these earlier to remind me to use them. So I'm going to pop an envelope follower on this audio track. And what we're going to look for, let's do Command F, pop over into our browser here. I'm going to search for something like a shaker loop, ideally. So let's say we filter it to the packs of Ableton Live. So you guys and girls should be able to find something like this yourself. Shaker, let's say loop. So something like this, we could just drag that onto that audio track. What else have we got here? So something with a nice kind of rhythm to it. It could be interesting. That was the one I just grabbed, right? Or not? I don't think it was actually. So we'll have that one as well. That's enough for a moment. So you'll hopefully see in a moment why I'm choosing these kind of loops, as they are going to play a role for the envelope follow. I'm just going to have a sip of water. It's quite a warm day here in Ibiza. Excuse me 1 second. All right. Plus I'm doing a lot of chatting, so apologies for that, but hopefully you find it useful. All right, so these cymbals and shaker tracks, they're really just there to drive the envelope follower. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm actually going to switch off the track, so we don't need to hear it. But if I play the bottom shaker loop here, and I turn on my envelope follower, you can see that I'm getting a nice follow of the shape of that shaker loop. So what I'm doing is I'm using all the rhythm and pattern of that to give myself a envelope follower, an envelope that's following that pattern and shape. And if we use the other shaker loop, then we see that it follows that. Now, the little yellow line is how dynamic that is. You can use the gain to increase the gain of the sample a bit if you want, for example, it to cover the whole sample range, if it's a bit quiet. And now what we're going to do is map this envelope follower to some controls, right? So maybe we could have the decay here of the spectral resonator mapped to that envelope follower. So let's do that. Let's map that to that. So now we get that kind of wobble. So now we got some nice movement from that. And the great thing about this track is, as I said, it's just a vehicle. We're not listening to that, and we can put any audio we like here as the source input for our envelope follower, and we can map this anywhere in our project, right? So, you know, if you open up the menu of the envelope follower, we could go over to the granulator and ask it to do something there. So we could say on the filter, let's for a second say no envelope. And let's use the mapping of the envelope follower to the granulator's filter. It's a bit wild, and we already had something there, so I'm going to take that away, but that was just an example to show you that you could have that, right? So now we put that back how it was. Let's maybe say, so we've got the resonator here. Our sample is stretched a bit, it's reversed a bit. We're in Complex Pro. Kind of interesting, really pitched down low. Let me just check that with an EQ. We might have to roll off a bit though of low ends. It's actually not too bad. also have a compressor on this. So this is our atmospheric layer. Can you hear how much difference the spectral resonator makes? That's great. Okay, so we've got this kind of my voice with this little kind of groovy pattern in it. Just trying out some different ideas here. As you can hear, there's lots and lots of kind of quite like this position here. All right, so next granulator. Again, let's just tidy up a little bit here. We know all this stuff surplus over here. So let's have, we've got envelope, follow and play. We've made this little atmospheric loop. Let's label that up as well so we know what that is. That's our Atmos. That came from the grain delay, my voice, where I started by saying drifting through space, chorded it into the granulator, and then we have moved our way along and it's produced this kind of nice little bit of unique Atmos in the background that we've got some movement out of it. It's also repitched a fair way, so let's just copy it down. Just check if it's not too much. Yeah, so you don't have to have it as lower pitched as I had in the first example. But I do quite like it down there. And all these different MIDI clip variations, right? Let's give ourselves a copy of this one down. The one I played with the MIDI controller. Let's try that, but also make it legato. So let's select all the notes. I think we'll work towards something like that in the future, but maybe. Well, let's see in the envelope section what happens if we pitch bend this a bit. Might sound quite cool. Remember, today is a pretty experimental one, trying to come up here with surprises, things that happen from doing these kind of exercises. All right, let's have a new MIDI track, another instance of Granulator. Let's go sample hunting this time. We're not going to use my voice as the input, capturing audio. We're going to drag in some audio. So let's have loop on. So you try bass. Play on my MIDI controller for a little bit, see if it come up something. Just for searching through. Sounds interesting, this sample. It's a bass loop, but I'm kind of thinking about it a little bit more in a chord sort of idea. So I've got this rough kind of playing that I did a moment ago on my MIDI keyboard. So what I might do is crop out this little section that I've played in. I haven't quantized it yet. So we might just park a copy of the original down here in case we want to revisit it. Pop in here and crop that. And then what we might do is try to turn these into chords a bit here. So even if we loop up just this area, maybe a little bit of quantization now. And then let's go back to our sample. All right, let's have a look at this sample that I dragged in. I quite like it with the chords. So played in a little riff on the keyboard, turned it into chord progression by adding the scale degrees over here directly in the browser. Super love that. This could be expanded further, so let's drop this down into a duplicate, turn it into a number 2. And in number 2, let's say we crop, again, this selection that we've chosen here. Select all the notes, turn them into legato. And on the legato ones, we'll come back in a second. So I know kind of my notes are in scale. I'm in a white note scale at this point in time, which could be A minor, D Dorian, or C major. Can't really see anything on the tuner as far as what notes, what tuning we're getting. I guess if I bring the grain size down, so we could tune that to an exact pitch, but I kind of quite like it a longer. Yeah, so if you're like willing to kind of zoom it into a smaller grain, you can see that I can get a more consistent pitch from that part of the grain. And then if I go to the transpose knob here, I can kind of tune that in with sense. So we know we're getting a B. So the sample's tuned to a B, right? And then we could, if it's a B now, we could bring down the transpose. Make sure we're on the right granulator. go up one. There we go. So now we've got our C back. And it probably pays to stay for the moment, as I said, in C major. Lots of different options up here in the clips. They're all in C. Right, so let's make this bass sample that ended up becoming chords, sounding a bit nicer. Processing on it. Right, back to this one. Okay, let's try to bring in our envelope follower again. A bit too dynamic for that part, but just wanted to try it out. Let's do that with an LFO perhaps, that we can control over here. Okay, let's bring a filter into here as well. With its own LFO. Just want some subtle delay changes here. Okay, so let's see if we can get this one back to kind of my voice, but in the granulator. So back to how I started with the drifting through space on the voice.
Drifting through space, 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 drifting through space. Drifting through space, 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 drifting through space.
Right, just a little bit of processing on this as well. Got a few things already here, but we might just start again here, I think. I have only scraped the surface, as I was sort of speaking about with the granulator. It's such an interesting device and it can go so deep. We've not really over modulated it, and I haven't also played around with this section over here where we can see classic loop and cloud, which would be another opportunity to come up with more interesting things. So okay, remember I legatoed this granulator a little bit before with the chords on it. Let's maybe duplicate it, the whole track. I'm gonna play around with the legato chord that I created of my chord progression, let's say. And let's add an arpeggio to that. So let's maybe see if we can come up with another sound for the arpeggiated. I've just been moving things up and down an octave here or there just to give ourselves a little bit more space. Funnily enough, no pun intended there. And let's say we've just got the same sample at the moment, so it's... So maybe we can find something else that could be interesting for this particular granulator. So let's say we filter again for a loop And maybe this time we're trying something like voice or maybe a string or something like that. Let's try this choir. Right. Let's turn off our processing. Copy it over. Just putting things back a little bit to where I had this somewhere that I quite enjoyed it, pitch-wise. Okay, let's try something else. And if we get some tuning from where we are, we could kind of, again, try to retune it a bit. The chords are in C major, we're in a white note scale. This particular sample I dragged in says it's G minor, so its root should be a G. So if we ignore the chords for a second, we put in a C. It's interesting as we're mainly getting a D back here. So if that's the case, we try and match it to a G. Try out some different arpeggio ideas. So let's see if we can get this matching to a C. Before we do that, we might just compress it a little bit. So we don't have to have that arpeggio if we want it nice and kind of minimal sounding. Just thought I would try out that arpeggio with copying over the chords that I came up with after that workflow of, it was a keyboard jam down here with the MIDI keyboard jammed in. Then I added some scale degrees to it, turned it into the chords that we have here. Then we found this nice sample. It's actually a bass sample, dragged it in there, and that's giving us this deep kind of chords. My voice drifting through space where we started. The atmospheres coming from my voice that we've twisted into that kind of atmosphere. So maybe we're just missing here something like maybe a bit of a bass line. So let's add a bass. All right, let's try out a few different bass sounds. Okay, sound alike. Let's just crop this selection of notes that I've chosen from what I played in. Let's quantize it a bit. Let's process the space a little bit. Okay, something else I want to try out here. Let's have the voice granulator popping into an audio track. So let's just label up a few things here so we also know what's what. Bass. This one is our chords. Deep Groove, Cruising Through the Stars, Cosmic Journey, Javi Diaz, yes, indeed. Kind of interesting results, right? And this is the idea here and kind of where we approached it from today. This is pretty much, apart from the bog standard drum loop that is a sample from a sample pack, we're going to fix that later, but everything else has kind of come about in a super organic way. Love it, like it, think it's okay. Whichever way, it's all about, again, sort of setting up to get sort of something that is outside of the comfort zone. I'm not playing it safe here. I'm trying things out. I'm doing it in real time. You guys and girls are seeing the results and hearing the results. And it's kind of like, you know, coming back to what I think we need to focus on. How do we find our unique, distinct sound? It's practicing, it's doing these sort of sessions, it's trying things out. The granulator, what a great device for coming up with, you know, interesting elements. So on this audio track, again, just getting myself in context with what's what a little bit for a second. So I can move that over. So let's try and get my vocal recorded through this track. So we're going to route in, sorry, I didn't put the name here. So drifting, let's call it. It's my voice saying drifting through space, granulated up. Let's try and record that into this track. So we need to say, listen to the drifting, arm it, put it to in. We don't need to monitor that. Click record. Right, so in theory, let's have a quick listen. Well, actually what we'll do again, I'll just drag that away to a fresh audio track as the recorder track. We can switch it back over, but in this case, I'm just going to remove it and set it up on a new audio track. Let's boost the volume in the clips down here, and we should have. Because what I want to try with that is I actually want to click on this audio clip and I want to ask it to slice to the kind of melody to a new MIDI track. Let's see what happens if we do that. Yeah, interesting. It's quite wild. Okay, so let's see hear what that sounds like. Okay, so that experiment wasn't quite as I planned, but let's try that again. Well, let's ask it. I mean, yeah, we could do a few things to try and simplify it. Could have probably pulled something out of what it thought happens in my vocal track, but yeah, sort of looking for something a little bit like what's going on down here in the low part. Just ignore how this sounds for the moment. So let's say we just loop up this bit here. We get rid of this instrument. Let's pop over to Ableton's instruments. Okay, where is that high note? There it is, way up there. Yeah, sometimes you can play around with these. What I was hoping to achieve with that was take the vocal, that's it here, record it to audio, then slice it to MIDI and see if it gave me back some sort of kind of melody or riff from it. And that's what all this MIDI is here that I'm sort of messing around with, and I'm now kind of resequencing it a bit if there's something useful in there. And sometimes there can be some fun results in here. This is what it thinks my vocal does. Not so sure about that, but you know, maybe looping this up and going through here, you know, we might find something cool that does kind of fit with the vocal. Sort of listening out for process this up a little bit. Just was looking for like just a simple little yeah, not quite. All right, we'll leave that off for the moment. Right, well, just playing around with a few things there. So in the end, you know, I did find something in the MIDI slicing to new harmony or new melody from the vocals, and I've just grabbed that little snippet there from that take and then made my own synth to play it back. So that's kind of what's going on here. We could maybe call that a riff, just a nice little melody, a little musical part. And then this is the vocal audio that I recorded. So it's the drift Vox and in audio, and now I've just been repitching that a bit to layer with the other vocal that is still in the granulator. So I kind of process that a bit differently, maybe pan it sort of a little bit different to the original, play around with that, and it could be a nice kind of layer. So a quick recap of what we've got here. We kind of began, so if we look at that vocal and we copy it down and we turn this one back to how it was, I started with recording my voice, drifting through space. That was me speaking. I recorded that into the granulator with my microphone, and then we've processed it, made patterns for it, found one that we kind of liked. I built this atmosphere from it by recording it again with a bunch of processing. So we ended up with this nice kind of spooky atmosphere from the voice and the granulator. And then as I've gone on from there, I then created another granulator where I dragged in some different samples, ended up settling quite quickly. It was the very first sample on this bass sample, which then actually became a riff that I played on the keyboard, which then became chords. And then I built a little bass line, playing it on my MIDI controller and just using a simple preset from Ableton Live, just making it sound a little bit more interesting. And now just playing around with some of the finishing touches. So on that note, let's have a little quick playback of what we've got and some possible sort of jamming around in it. Let's turn off everything over here. This could be a nice kind of layer, panning around from side to side. So yeah, I mean, coming back to the philosophy part of today, I did spend a lot of time in the beginning sort of explaining the thumbnail of the video, you know, what do the following artists have in common. So if you missed that part, do go back and watch the start of the video, and I'll explain kind of why the thumbnail and what I was kind of trying to do here today, which was, again, what I'm kind of encouraging you guys and girls to do, and that is try and find your own unique, distinct sound, and ways to do that. Set up workflows, you know, obviously practice, put in the time, do the hours, have fun, but try out effects and devices and instruments to try and find things that, you know, are happening in your environment that aren't happening anywhere else, the things that will make surprises. So if someone's listening back to this, they'll be trying to imagine, how did you do that? Is that a loop from Splice? No, it isn't. It's happening on the computer here. Was it my voice? Yes, into the granulator. So we kind of know that there's a decent amount, if not a lot in here, of original ideas, and that's kind of where you want to explore step by step. If you're beginning out the journey, it's absolutely fine to use samples and emulate what others are doing and sort of work your way towards making your own unique material. That's absolutely fine. But if you kind of start already with the thinking process that one track in your idea is something a bit experimental, a bit of a will it work, will it not, I think it's an encouraging thing to start doing. And then as you work towards the future and you put in the hours and you understand all the different techniques and possibilities, then you can obviously go in many directions. But step by step, as I said, all of those artists on the thumbnail, they've been in it a long time. They put in the time. They've had highs and lows. They didn't quit. They kept going. They love what they're doing. They're having fun, you know, and at the end of the day, it should absolutely start with fun. But just, you know, think about, don't play it safe. Don't be predictable. Don't always do the same thing each time over, because you will end up getting the same results. And why are those artists hard to copy? Because they have their own little secret sauce going on, own little techniques and things they're doing that, you know, maybe they're great at arranging, great at coming up with bass lines, great at making their own sounds, you know, and they take passion and pride in that. And then sometimes it's a combination of those things. So I'm going to call that a wrap. I will add, as always, a video that I would suggest you would enjoy if you enjoyed today's video, something to watch the next video on from this one that will take you in a similar direction with something new from my channel. And of course, if you did enjoy this video all about Ableton Live and finding your own unique sound, consider giving it a thumbs up, ding the bell, subscribe to the channel so you know when I'm next live streaming, which will be, all going well, next Sunday coming up. Thanks for those of you in the chat who did jump in there. Great to see Prof. Bloom and Xavi Diaz as always. Thank you very much for your help and input, as I said last week. So inspiring. Thanks always for sharing your knowledge. Very welcome. Inspiration is what we hope for, really. You know, for someone like myself, I get a lot of pleasure listening to, you know, the music of the people I work with, and, you know, obviously great to hear great things happening out there in the charts, in the music, and people spending the time crafting and finding their own sounds. Hi, welcome to the Futures. Hello. Just about to disappear from today's stream, so I'm not sure if you're just jumping in. If you are, do watch back on replay and catch up on where we got to arrive here. As always, take care of yourself. Have a great Sunday. Peace out. Keep an eye out for the scheduling of the next one. Should be next Sunday at 3 p.m. live and direct from my studio here in Ibiza. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. See you soon. Bye for now. Ciao, ciao.